Welcome to the upstreamlife.com, and I'm your host and founder, Vishal Krishna. Fintech is my favorite subject. Why? The rate of digital transformation is phenomenal in India. Just look at how the UPI has transformed the country. It's one of the most inclusive payment platforms to emerge from India for the world, and the fintech market is just about starting out to achieve its zenith. Okay, I'll tell you the numbers. The Indian fintech market has received 29 billion in funding across 2,000 deals, and it's a 14% market share globally, and India has the number 2 spot in the deal volume. This is the report by BCG and Matrix Partners. If you want that report, you can Google it and find it. It's called State of the Fintech Union, obviously by BCG and Matrix. I'm talking to Tanul about this change. Tanul is the founder and CEO of Afthonia Lab. Tanul, how are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How have you been, Vishal?
I've been good. I'm going to talk about our Singapore stint and all the impact there in a bit. But let me talk about Afthonia, ladies and gentlemen. Afthonia Lab enables fintech startups to get to market, raise money, and deliver results for their stakeholders. Afthonia, by the way, has 9 startups in its portfolio. It has some marquee advisors and investors. Mark F. DeSantis, a celebrated Silicon Valley investor, is part of this. And Tanul has been running this for 3 years now. She's worked in the corporate world for 15 years before plunging in full time into the startup world. Tanul, quite a journey. I'm a bit old in the tooth, and you're so young. You do your martial arts and everything. We'll talk about that too. We just got back from Singapore, and fintech is buzzing. It's the best buzzword on the planet. What is the fintech stage in India as you see it?
So I think, Vishal, like you and I were at Singapore, and we saw that fintech is not like a linear line, right? Depending on the country that you are and how developed you are, the conversations are ranging from micro pensions in Bangladesh to ESG in fintech, right? So that spectrum is so wide. I think in India, we're just at that cusp, right? We've got a lot to go. Payments have taken hold. They've been the blue-eyed, child of the Indian ecosystem. But I think there's so much work to be done in insurance, blockchain, pensions, the underfinanced segment. And I'm using the word underfinanced and not underbanked because, you've got insurance, you've got pensions, you've got longevity finance. There is so much that we've still got going for us.
I saw the height of that conference, right? I mean, it had more than 25,000 or 30,000 people. It had more than 10,000 companies. I don't know what the number is, but it was just phenomenal. Right. And I look at India's UPI and the impact that we've made to billions of lives. And I sometimes still wonder that Indian fintech has not yet been celebrated the way Singapore, being a small city, is celebrating fintech for Southeast Asia. Don't you think so?
I think we still have to sort of, get our due in that area. I think we need to talk a lot more about it. We need to tap a lot more into the global ecosystem, so that our startups get a, level playing field even in the global scenario. I've always believed this, and that's been one of the foundations at Afthonia, where we say when you build in India, we're such a diverse and complex nation that you can almost take your product anywhere in the world. So you're right, we still need to sort of tap into the global ecosystem and, write our story there.
So the opportunities for me are, digital lending, right? We've Absolutely. Seen that pan out. We've seen payments. Payments are all set. We're all set to go. But what are the other avenues or sweet spots that you think that fintech can make an impact on?
I think there's insurance. Definitely, because traditionally, insurance has been around and the offtake has not been high in India, but we've seen that change. I think making insurance accessible and making it based on usability. Think if you get fever, OPD insurances, those kind of products, pensions, because the thing is your salaries are not growing in proportion with the inflation. And none of us have pension plans, right? So we all need, with lifespans going up, we need something in that space. One of the other favorite spaces for us where we've also incubated a startup is succession management. I'm going to just sort of quote some numbers, and I think 1.25 lakh crores is lying in unclaimed assets in India when somebody dies. And that's a huge segment waiting to be tapped. And the average time, if you have a will to claim these unclaimed assets, is about 4 to 12 years. And if you don't leave a will behind, which is most of us, it's about 8 to 12 years. So small innovations in spaces which are actually need-based to make life simpler, right? That's what we need to start focusing on.
So these are good. This is a company that you fund, you've incubated, of course. It's called Monesh. The other one's called Fund Grow, right? That was the
That's
wealth
right.
management for teens, and it's such a wonderful
Yes.
subject. And I'll talk to both those startups, ladies and gentlemen. They'll be out soon. You have to tell me about the journey of Afthonia. You started it 3 years ago.
Yes.
You started it just before COVID, right?
That's right.
What's been the experience? Why do you start this? You have been in the payments ecosystem. You've been there for 20 years, right? You want to talk about that experience and why Afthonia happened, and also tell us, what does Afthonia mean?
Okay, I'll start with the easier one. Afthonia means limitless, and that was the idea when I created it. It was about creating a limitless opportunities for startup founders to explore and grow. I've been in the corporate world, Vishal, and then I co-founded a startup, which was a food-based startup. And we did this around 2012 and 2013. And while, I had a network to see having worked, I realized that India is a tough ecosystem to crack as a founder, because the things that you need is people, capital, knowledge, and access to a network to sort of grow. And there's only so much that you can tap into with your network. And when you map this with other countries like US and China, they have a very structured ecosystem. You're talking about 2,500 plus and 1,500 plus incubators in these countries in the last count. Specialized incubators. So, US will have a Charlottesville area which focuses on insurance. And India, is number 3 in number of startups, but we had on the last count about 500 plus incubators. Very few private and independent incubators. Most of these were education institute backed or government institute backed, right? So the idea was to set up something which provides a structured support system, a level playing field, a global stage for our startups to sort of grow. And that's how the idea came in. Fintech is complex, regulated for the right reasons. And to navigate this space as a founder, you need to have sounding board and, the entire gamut of network and net worth to grow. And that's Fintech for us.
Tell me entirely about the company. Why did you start this? What do you want to achieve with it? What are the highs and lows? I mean, the last 2 years, obviously, we are just out of COVID. I mean, COVID's around, but we've gotten used to it in India at least. So tell me about that, please.
So we started this in 2019, and the idea was to sort of create a program that provides the flexibility and a path for founders to reach the next inflection point. So we worked on some different things. Our program is a rolling cohort, so we onboard through the year. We have a very intensive screening process. So to give you an idea, we spoke to about 2,000 founders, incubated around 9. We work on the pillars of providing a personalized and customized mentorship program. This is based on a blueprint that comes in when we start talking to you. The couple of things that we do is access to market, access to mentors, knowledge, and access to capital, right? The first year was celebrated in COVID, working from home, but COVID sort of helped accelerate that pace in fintech. So we've seen some very, very, interesting innovations coming our way. So for example, like I was talking about Monesh, which focuses on succession management, right? So in the last 1 year, they actually have processed close to over 150 crore plus in claims. The other thing was when, parents were holed up at home with children, there was literally, no space. And the idea was to sort of start teaching kids about financial literacy, right? And that's where we saw startups like FundGrow emerge, which are completing the whole cycle, where they're teaching you about money, how to earn money. So they've signed up companies where you can be a teen lancer and work for projects. And then how do you sort of spend that money? So the journey for us has been very interesting because we've seen startups coming in from different spaces for us. We've seen startups pivot. So somebody like Taraki, who we'd incubated when they were a B2C company, and we spoke about this when we, spoken in the earlier days, is now a B2B focused, where they're actually providing solutions for startups and MSMEs to have rolling capital access. So it's been interesting in the last 9 years. A lot of them have got funded, a lot of them have grown in the last 3 years. And what we plan to do is, in the immediate focus for us is to get more startups. We're looking to get about 15, 20. Again, insurance, blockchain, anything in tier 2, tier 3 solutions is going to be a favorite area for us. From the Afthonia perspective, we want to be like that one place where everybody who's looking for fintech solutions or wants to talk about fintech comes to. So if you're a corporate who's looking at a corporate innovation in fintech, we're the people we'd want you to talk to, right? If you're an investor who wants to focus on fintech-based investments, whether you're an angel, whether you're a micro investor, we'd want us to be the people you come to. Even globally, that's our goal, that we become the one place where all fintech solutions are looked at.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, I think your experience of the last 10 years, you're on the money with the startups that are coming and impacting in India, and therefore there needed to be a place that probably could support them. What was the business model? What was your idea? I know you'd get all these people in place. I'll talk about your entire ecosystem. You have a team of advisors, great advisors. You have a
Yes.
team of angel investors. You have these startups coming in, but you don't typically work like an accelerator or an incubator. It's a different model. So how does it work? How does the business model for Afthonia work?
So we work, on a percentage of equity. We believe in single digit equity. The way we're different is we don't come out there and say, hey, give me X%. We let the founders tell us what they want to share. The whole idea is, I've been a founder, and as a founder, you hate sharing equity, even though that's the only thing you've got to share at that moment, right? It helps us gain the confidence of the founding team and also helps us analyze their objectivity. So the idea for us is to have an overused term, which is skin in the game from day one, so that as the startups grow, we grow, and that's how we're going to be sort of making money. That's the plan as of now.
Not many people also know that you were a founder between 2012 and 19 with a brand called Eatlish, right? It was called Eatlish, correct?
That's right.
Right. Do you want to
Yes,
talk
that's right.
about that experience as well? Is this sort of your second kind of, you went from food to fintech, which is two different things, right? So it's like your second coming here. I want to know how was that experience and how has India changed with that? We've seen how the food business has panned out as well, but everything
Right.
is linked to payments. If payments had not been solved, I think it would have been difficult for the food tech industry to have grown as well. And everything is aligned to payments, right? And fintech, right?
Right.
In a way. So you want to tell us how your experience was for those 7 years? And I think you sold that company and then you
That's
came
right.
into fintech because you were in Paymate earlier. And
That's right.
why come back to fintech? So I want to ask you. Go on.
So I did fintech to food to fintech again, so it's been like a coming home for me. When we set up the business in 2012, it was very, very different, Vishal. I mean, startup was just about being spoken about and growing. And in those 7 years, there was action, but not the action that you have right now. And food was a space which was just about growing. We started off as a B2C brand and then quickly pivoted to a B2B, and we sold across 32 modern retail outlets in the country, like Nature's Basket, Food Hall, Amazon, and places. When I remember that when we started, it was hard to get a payment gateway, and there was an integration fee that you needed to pay, and charges were high. And I was coming in from a payment industry, so there was some idea. And because we were bootstrapped, we didn't want to sort of make the payment, commit there. So the first thing we did was our website said you can pay us using NEFT. I think today that has changed so much. Just going and getting an API integrated and pay as you go is something that's wonderfully changed. It was hard to grow the business, although we were sort of seasoned professionals, because entrepreneurship is a different world. There are time traps. You waste time on stuff that you should not be waiting on. As a bootstrapped founder, you're always fighting between what's critical and important, right? But it was interesting. It helped me understand what a founder who's a first-time founder would go through, and especially young founders who don't even have corporate experience to sort of leverage, right? And with that in mind, Afthonia sort of came into the picture. And the reason I picked fintech is because fintech is extremely complex, can be CapEx and OpEx heavy. And you could just sort of, most founders believe that you succeed when you raise money. But that's actually when your troubles actually start. Because capital utilization and having to sort of sustain that capital without compromising your growth is a big, big task. And I think that was one of the key things why we set up Afthonia. So it could be like a place where you could experiment, learn, and when you're ready to take the company, you come with a product, but the product to company stage is very, very different. So it was about creating entrepreneurs with the ability to succeed and an attitude towards profit making.
What are some of the lows for you? I mean, the typical mistakes that entrepreneurs across the board make. You ran a company for 7 years, now you're running your second one. It's been 3 years. What are the typical mistakes that you made in your first one, and that made you do better in the second one? And do mistakes happen all the time? Because at this point of time, you're also a mentor to so many startups. What are some of the lessons that you'd want to share with these fintech companies?
So if you're not making a mistake, then you're not trying enough. Then you're playing it really, really safe, right? The one thing that I always feel that we sort of, erred with Eatlish was that we didn't take brand communication very seriously. We didn't talk about it to a lot of people. We would have had an exit faster if we've sort of, gotten ourselves out there much quicker. So I think, the ability, when you talk to one person, Vishal, that person takes it to many, many people. So I think some of the common mistakes are not talking enough about what you're doing, not asking for help, too much focus on investment raise versus actually growing a business, right? I think these are a few things that founders sort of need to be conscious of when they're raising. And of course, believing that if you've raised capital, you're successful. That's just the starting point.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I'm worried that a lot of these founders spend so much money, and after the first raise, right? That really insults me sometimes. Why are you spending so much money in marketing? What is your typical thought process that, when, there's spray and pray for hiring, there's spray and pray for marketing and PR. What's the right balance? Or some of the founders say it's just the way it is? But is there a panacea for this? Is there a way you build sustainable businesses? Yesterday, I met a fintech, in Bombay, which said that they hadn't spent so much money, and therefore, in their space, which is into transformation of bus payments, bus ticketing, they have survived
Right.
because they haven't spent a lot of money. And the startup I'm talking about is Chalo, of course. But what are your thoughts? How do you sustain yourself to build a business?
So I think the whole thing is about striking that balance between sustenance and growing. And the thing is that I think there is, and I have, I think digital marketing has changed the way we do things. But there's also traditional methods and ways of getting a consumer, and it's about striking that right mix between traditional, marketing channels and as well as the digital marketing channels. So FundGrow, for example, has not spent too much on marketing, but they're sitting on 43K users, a mix of teens and parents, and over, 240 companies. And one of the things that we stress on is, so for in our ecosystem, we have what we call as growth mentors. These are people who've come in from marketing and sales backgrounds who will tell you how to get there, right? Because as a startup, because everyone else is advertising, you want that visibility. But the question to ask is, do you need visibility? Do you need sales? Do you need leads? And then you decide your spends, right?
Tanul, you said it absolutely. You're bang on there. Now, I want to talk about these words that we use in the fintech ecosystem. What about buy now, pay later? And some people say save now, pay later. All these startups are doing this. What are your thought processes on certain business models like buy now, pay later, save now, pay later? Is it innovative enough for you? Because I think it's part of wealth tech in a way. So what are your thoughts?
So India has had buy now, pay later forever. If you remember, people would go to goldsmiths and they would buy a jewelry and they would pay them in installments. So Indian industry has had buy now, pay later forever. The save now, pay later, also again a part of the jewelry thing. I don't know if you're aware, but Tanishq used to run this scheme, and so did the other things, where you would put a certain amount every month and cumulatively you would save something, and after a year you could encash it for jewelry, right? So we've had forms of these. I think some aspects of these are necessary because the traditional financial metrics for giving out payments and loans don't work for a certain segment of the society. So we need to reform that, but we need to have checks and balances in place, right? It cannot be a tool to sort of just sort of better your books and give out payments, and then the customer suffers. The idea is to get your customers on board, because a business grows only when you have happy, successful customers. So buy now, pay later, save now, pay later, needed, but with checks and balances in place.
Okay, let's now talk about the crypto thing, right? A lot of people in the crypto world in Singapore, we bought coffee through crypto in Singapore. So you want to talk about how's that panning out from an Indian perspective and from the South Asian perspective as well? Where are we in terms of fintech when you compare India?
So India's not like a very homogeneous market, right? It's extremely diverse. And when we talk about India, we have to look at the Indian diaspora, right? The buying behavior and patterns in a metro are very, very different from tier 2, tier 3 cities, and so are the needs, right? So if I have to look at the solutions, I think the solutions right now, what we've been focusing on is the urban metro. First, we need to transition that and make it more solutions available for tier 2, tier 3 cities, right? So think of agriculture plus finance, insurance solutions where you can have better payouts using technologies, making the Kisan credit card sort of more digitized so people have access to that, digitizing M&Riga. I think these are the larger plays we need to focus on. Crypto is something that has been of interest. We have been tracking the space. One of the few startups that we sort of incubated was BlockSurvey, which actually used blockchain for privacy data related collection, right? They're now like a pre-series A company. So we're enthusiastic about this space, but in India, you would need to come in with, again, a right mix of checks and balances, because you're talking about a very vulnerable diaspora also. I mean, if my mom's going to ask me, can I buy crypto? I'm going to be excited but worried, because I don't know if she has enough information on it.
What are your thought processes in Southeast Asia, right? Crypto is very popular.
That's right. But they've been, way ahead of the curve, Vishal. Singapore has been doing fintech for, I think, a couple of decades now. We were there, and look at how easy it is to get a metro card to swipe it and move on. So I think that customer segment is extremely mature and advanced. So for them to embrace something like a Meta or a crypto is easy. But I always believe that India has a tendency to skip generations. Most of us didn't have landlines and we moved to smartphones and mobile phones. So I think we could just skip a generation and take over a lot of other products that, have not been brought in yet.
What do you think about regulation in India, the regulatory sandboxes? The RBI is very proactive, right? Your thought processes on regulation, please.
Okay, it's not going to be like what most people say. I believe that the regulators in India have always kept the interest of the people in mind. When you look at finance and technology, then the responsibility is even higher. So there are areas where there are no regulations, which means that area is ripe for innovation. But when innovation happens, the regulators need to step in to protect the interests of the people, right? So I think that cycle's moving well. Is it moving fast enough for entrepreneurs? Some of us might find it slow. But you're talking about a country where nobody had landline phones and everybody has a mobile phone, is because the regulators stepped in and opened the market. So I believe that the regulators in India keep pace, bring in checks and balances, but are progressive enough to open technology sectors.
Okay, there is agri and fintech, there is prop tech and fintech, there is retail and fintech. There's fintech everywhere. Okay,
Correct.
so how do you see the next 3 years pan out for India? I think we have done a very good job of branding UPI globally, but I hope it gets adopted in countries like UK and the US and Southeast Asia. I don't know what barriers we face, but do you generally believe Indian startups are out there to go global, or is the Indian market large enough to serve local demand? What are some of the cultural changes that you see from a favorable regulatory landscape that exists in India at this point of time towards making fintech go global from India?
So when you talk about India going global, right? So for example, BlockSurvey, the startup that we were talking about, they're actually a global first company as far as we're concerned. They've been serving the global markets. Their solutions and investments are both from a global perspective, right? I think there is space for growth for Indian startups, both in the Indian market and global stage. depending on the solution that you're working on. If you look at some of the insurance startups, US is very saturated as a market, right? So if you're an insurance startup, I'd definitely sort of look at focusing on the tier 2, tier 3 segments within India. But I think it's time for us to actually start going after the global segment more aggressively, because the way we think of product and solutions is much deeper and much more complex, which makes it easier for us to sell in global countries.
Fantastic answers. You've got answers for everything that I've thrown at you at this point of time. But you keep saying insurtech. Why? Why do you like insurtech so much, or wealth tech?
I love insurtech because insurance is where banking was a couple of years ago, right? LIC is one of the largest players and probably has 70 to 80% of the market share, and the rest of the players have about 30%. As a society, we've been averse to talking about insurance because it's like selling a fire extinguisher, right? You don't want to talk about death. But the Indian diaspora is changing. We're traveling more. We're more aware. COVID has brought in a reality check that anything could happen to anybody, right? And that's why I think insurance is just at that stage where it's going to start taking off, right? Medical expenses are going up, will continue to go up. And also consumers are getting more aware. So think about it. You ride a bike, I ride a bike, but I ride lesser. So why should I pay more premium or as much premium as you, because my usage is lesser? So I think the Indian consumer is getting more and more aware. And that's why I'm very gung-ho about insurance in this space.
What about rural fintech? You see rural innovation happening, tier 3, tier 4. I see that happening. I don't see banks being digitized yet. That's an opportunity that I've bet on. So what are your thoughts on rural fintech?
So you know what, NABARD has been doing some really good work in this segment. And I know when I was at Paymate, we'd worked with NABARD to sort of digitize the mobile, the Kisan credit card, and this was using SMS and IVR. I think that it's time now to shift focus to the other sectors like tier 2, tier 3 sectors. So like you said, agri-tech and insurance, Kisan credit cards, healthcare and fintech, making it more accessible, right? So those are the areas that I think are going to grow hugely. Pensions, we saw what Indian Postal Bank has done, right? So now think the kind of change that can bring when more and more fintechs partner and leverage that ecosystem.
Do you see a super app like a Grab or something in India and offers fin, because they are applying for a banking license or something of that sort there? Do you see this happening?
I think that everyone's going to want to get into fintech. It's not far away. I think one of the other areas that everyone's going to try and go together is fintech and electric sort of areas, EVs or responsible fintech. I think that's going to be the next sort of poster boy right now.
Okay, I want to talk about Afthonia's next 18 months. What's important for you? What is the to-do list for you? Is fundraising on the plan? Is getting more startups there in the entire plan of yours for the next 18 months? Just let me know what are some of the difficulties that you may face in 18 months, because there's a global headwind, right? In terms of they say the funding is never going to come. A lot of people who have just started fundraising now are saying that it's been very difficult. What are your thoughts?
Okay, so next 18 months, we're going to focus on getting more startups. We're going to look at growing the startups that we have even more aggressively. From an Afthonia perspective, we want to look at getting more angels interested, both globally and within India, in the fintech space, right? It might sound contradictory to the views that you're hearing, but I don't think that investment in the early stage is going to sort of dry up. It might get more responsible. We might ask tough questions. There might be not the crazy valuations that we've seen. That might not happen, and which I think is all sort of for the betterment in the long term, right? But is the financing going to dry up? I don't think so. And I think globally, there's going to be more interest, because when you invest in Indian startups for the same dollar value, you sit on a bigger sort of, cap table, share of the cap table. So it's just pure business. So our focus areas are going to be those very clearly.
My favorite thoughts from you are that you are into martial arts and you don't give up, right? So in this entire startup journey, what's made you happy? What are your inspirations? How do you keep yourself busy? And because whenever I met you, you're always optimistic. You always have a smile, and you always, and I saw you in the conference, and the damn conference room was at least 1.5 kilometers long, and I seen you going up and down, up and down. And like I put up a post, most of us did 30 kilometers of walking in 3 days, right?
Right.
So how do you manage that? What are your inspirations? How do you keep that story alive about yourself?
I do Krav Maga, you know that, and I also trek, right? And the very clear things that you get from these two things is A, you can't give up. My ideal is Bachindri Pal, who trekked the Everest when there was nothing available. So I'm a realist, but I don't believe in sitting there and saying the world is going to get over. So I'm going to sit out there and say, hey, how do we solve this and move on? That's exactly what my job as a mentor and incubator also is, right? So just general philosophy in life is to just keep at it, right? Something's
Do you get time
gotta
to read
give
it all,
sometime.
Tanul? Do you read it all? What are you
Yes,
reading
I
at
do.
this point of time?
I'm reading a book called Ancient India, and it's very interesting. It talks about how the historical contradictions in the Indian society are impacting it even today. And it's a very simply written book and a very beautiful book because I love understanding people because ultimately we're selling to people. So that's what I've been reading right now.
So, do you remember the author? Because I could recommend it to people in the description when I put it up on
Upinder
YouTube.
Singh. Upinder Singh. I think Upinder Singh.
Okay, what else are you doing, Tanul? I'm curious to know what are the few tips that you give us to say that, okay, guys, apply to Afthonia today, and how many say emails do you get to say I want to be part of Afthonia, and leave us with one final advice about why you should stay alive as an entrepreneur. Don't give up.
Okay, so the thing is that we get lots and lots of emails. Why should you come to Afthonia? Because it's the country's only fintech program. So if you're looking for expert advice and capital in fintech, we're the guys to come to. You can write to us at ops@afthonialab.com. We reply to every mail and we pride ourselves on that, even if it kills us, but we do that. As an entrepreneur, when you sort of start your journey, right, you're going there to build something, and that's what should keep you going every single day, because you're going to build something that's going to make a difference to somebody at some point in time. So every time you wake up in the morning and you want to give up, think about how you're going to make a difference in somebody's life today, and that's going to keep you going for the rest of the day, one day at a time.
One day at a time it is. And Tanul, thank you for answering all those questions. I'll have you back on the show again. We should do a panel together. And ladies and gentlemen, we know each other. That's why we've been breezing through all these questions. Like Tanul's just like that. That's how she sells her startup as well. And we're going to bring our startups, Monesh and Fun Grows, soon into this podcast. And Tanul, look forward to seeing you in Bangalore. Thank you for doing this podcast at theupstreamlife.com. And ladies and gentlemen, write to her at ops@afthonialab.com.
That's right. Thank you so much for having me over. It's always fun talking to you.
The next one's going to be in my studio. We're going to record something else. And we're going to do a panel soon, Tanul. So thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.